Hello, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. I'm Ash, and with me is my beautiful co-host, Suze, and unfortunately, Tammy is unavailable to join us today. Also with us is our fact checker of many hats, Dave, who actually took on the role as guest host for our last episode as he interviewed the legendary David Icke. And also joining us tonight while Tammy is away is Hayden, our producer, who actually was one of our first guests. How y'all doing today?
I'm excellent.
Of course you are.
Got to segue back into that.
Swell. I'm swell, and then I have to hand it to you. After hosting last week, it's not as easy as it looks. So, hats off to you guys.
Thank you very much.
You did awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank
you. Good word, Hayden. Good word.
Very good.
I'm trying.
And I am splendid.
Splendid. Love it.
And our guest today is Heather Mason, the founder of caWsbar, or Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights, which is a cross-Canada nonpartisan coalition of women and male allies working together to preserve the rights and protections of women and girls. Heather can be found on X at Mason 134211F. Good one, Heather. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Heather, I've listened to a number of podcasts that you've been on, and I think you have such an empowering story. Can you please tell the audience a bit about yourself and how you found yourself where you are today?
Yeah, so actually, I'll start off with telling you what that number and letter means on my X handle.
Awesome. I've been wondering.
It's actually my FPS number. So that's a number that they give to all federal inmates in Canada.
Oh. No way. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yes. So it's confusing for most, but there is a meaning behind that. I'm Heather Mason. I'm a former federal prisoner in Canada. I was sentenced to 3 years at Grand Valley Prison for Women in Kitchener, Ontario. I dealt with a really bad drug addiction to fentanyl, and I kept going downhill, and I ended up serving a prison sentence. I am about 7.5 years clean from all substances now, so that's good.
Oh, awesome.
Congratulations.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
for you. That's amazing.
And actually, it's kind of cool. Next week, I'll be 7 years clean from methadone. So I'm not even on any of the methadone or Suboxone programs, which I'm really proud of because that's like harder to get off of than normal drugs.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
wonderful.
Yeah. So I have been advocating for federally sentenced women specifically regarding the transfer policy. So men who identify as women who transfer into women's prisons. And like you mentioned earlier, I am actually a founding member of Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights. And we advocate for women and girls to have their own single-sex spaces. And I lead the prison team for caWsbar.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what sorts of things do you see yourself doing throughout caWsbar?
So I've been doing a lot of research. At the beginning, I was reaching out to all our members of parliament, and I realized very quickly that they just don't care. Mm-hmm. So I've taken my focus away from writing letters to them about the prison issue and done more of community outreach. So trying to get people to realize what is going on. So I've been doing a lot of protesting. We just did a really cool event for International Women's Day in March in Toronto. We had a bunch of women speakers come, and it was a great event. A lot of people were there. We raised a lot of awareness. But mainly it's having small conversations, because it's those little conversations that enable you to teach what is going on, because most people don't know what's going on. And then those people speak to other people who speak to other people. And I find that we are able to reach more people that way. But there's a lot of different areas with caWsbar. Like we focus on like crime stats in prison, same-sex relationships, like sports, the washrooms, locker rooms, change rooms. There's a lot that we focus on. And I mainly focus on the prison aspect, but I am part of, like, I'm a founding member and also part of the steering committee. So I have my hands on a lot.
That's amazing. So how long has caWsbar been around? I hadn't heard about it until I heard you. I don't even know how I first heard about you, but I don't think it was on Twitter. I think I went and found you on Twitter afterwards, which is interesting. But how long has caWsbar been around for?
So we launched in December 2019. It was originally 10 women who got together and wanted to start an organization. It was right after the Wax My Balls incident. I'm sure you guys know who I'm referring to.
Oh God.
I do not. Can you please elaborate? Whoa.
Poor
Yeah.
Hayden.
So Yaniv out in BC, who went around to all the immigrant women and tried to get them to wax his genitals, and they refused. And then he tried to do a human rights complaints against them, sue them because they weren't comfortable waxing his genitalia. So it all kind of stemmed from that. And it got talking about needing an organization that protects women and children. And actually, how I met the women who, the other founding members, was I got out of prison in October 2018, but I ended up going to rehab for 3 months in North Bay, and then I went to the halfway house in Toronto. So I arrived in Toronto in 2019, and I didn't want to get involved with any of this stuff because I was on parole and I was worried about like getting in trouble and being revoked. And you're basically groomed and taught that these men are women and you must use proper pronouns and you can't dead name them. And so I wasn't going along with any of this stuff. I was just kind of staying out of it. But I ended up getting a message from April Halley from Newfoundland, and she was asking me about this Christopher Belmore, who was identifying as a woman who was actually incarcerated at Grand Valley. And she sent me this long message, and little did she know at the time, I was actually in the halfway house with Chris. And I read the message and I was like, oh man, this girl's nuts. Like, I'm not responding to her at all. And this was about January 2019. And then in June 2019, I actually went to the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Society's national conference in Ottawa. And sorry, this is a long story, but
No, please continue. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's important to get to how I ended up in caWsbar. But I was at this conference, and a woman that I was incarcerated with, she got up on stage in front of everyone that works for the Elizabeth Fry Society and for caWs, and she told them about how she was groomed and sexually harassed by a prolific serial pedophile, a man who identified as a woman, and told about how it triggered her and how she has a lot of trauma because she has an extensive history of childhood sexual assault. And all the women who are paid to work for incarcerated women, to advocate for us and support us, were just like completely silent. And then they said, we're concerned about the transphobia in the room, and you don't need a vagina to be a woman.
Oh my
God. And she started crying and left the stage, completely upset that she even shared this with them and that they weren't supporting her. And I just could not believe that this was happening, and that the only national organization in Canada that's dedicated to advocate for federally sentenced women were essentially turning their backs on us and leaving us women behind who did not agree with the new gender identity or expression policies. And it was that day that I was like, well, if they're not going to do anything about it, I'm not going to sit here and be quiet. I'm going to speak up about it. And I started speaking up about it
Good for you.
that weekend. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I went back to my messages and found my message from April. And I was like, hey, what do you want to know? I'll tell you everything. And she was the one that introduced me into the gender critical circle. And then in October 2019, Megan Murphy was coming to speak in Toronto. I don't know if you guys remember that event, but there was like 500, 700 trans activists that were protesting outside of the Toronto Public Library. And I showed up to that event by myself. I didn't really know anybody. And it was so intimidating because there's so many police officers there. And I'm on parole. I don't have good experience with the police. And I'm like, I'm supposed to trust that these people are going to keep me safe. Like,
Wow.
so I had like major anxiety just being there. And during the event, Megan Murphy actually mentioned my name and told people that I was speaking out about the prison system. And then these women reached out to me the day after and asked me if I would become a founding member of caWsbar and lead the prison team. And that is essentially the story that got me to being a part of caWsbar.
Wow. Can I ask you a quick question, Heather?
Yeah.
What is the gender critical circle?
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
So you're critical of gender identity. So it's men or women. Trans activists will call you a TERF. So essentially, gender critical people are TERFs.
So the normal people.
Yeah.
Normal.
What does TERF mean again? I've heard that term a lot, but what does it mean? It's like TERF.
We talk about it on the feminist episode. What the heck, Hayden?
Oh, did I don't know. I'm sorry.
They call it the trans exclusionary radical feminists, but you don't even need to be a radical feminist. Like it's literally just normal people that actually have critical thinking skills.
So basically me, that I'm on Twitter all the time reminding people that women don't have dicks, automatically makes me a TERF.
Yes.
Yep. 100%.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
I saw before we started, you had a newsreel at the bottom that said breaking news, chicks don't have dicks. Where did that go?
That's right.
Oh, that would have been Dave. He's good at banners.
Right
There
there.
it is. There it is. There it is.
There we go.
I like it.
Just giving everybody the facts here. Just
way to go, Dave.
Facts.
Thank you.
I don't. This is kind of an interesting thing that we have Hayden on tonight in the place of Tammy's spot here. Normally he just hangs out behind the scenes and he produces the final product of our podcast. And we asked him if he wanted to join us, and chat with you tonight. And Hayden was one of our first guests on the show, and he actually had a girlfriend who, actually, Hayden, why don't you tell the story? Because it's kind of interesting how these intersect.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually thinking about that the more I heard about Heather as we've gotten into this episode. I'm like, oh, this is kind of funny that I ended up on this one. But when I was 22, which wasn't too many years ago, it's 3 years ago now, my girlfriend at the time came out to me as non-binary and didn't know how far they wanted to take that. But it's funny that we meet on this episode because you're fighting for the rights, the sex-based rights for women and females, right? But so she came out to me as non-binary, and we ended up splitting like a few weeks later because I just wasn't that into it. And then a few years later down the road, I met Tammy, who's one of the hosts on this podcast, and she actually gave me a platform to speak about it. And Suze, Ash, and Dave were like the first people to ever be like, oh yeah, like you're normal, like this is fine, right? Just like you said earlier about critical thinking skills, right? So it is funny that we meet on this episode.
So Hayden was kind of made to feel like he was a bigot for not wanting to, stay with she was about to be his fiance, and then that everything changed. And so it's crazy how people can be made into bigots just because they, I don't even know how you say that, right? But
well, exactly. And there wasn't anything in my mind, knowing that like the definition of the word bigotry, that made me out to be a bigot. It was more the lens that people were looking at me through for just not changing my opinion.
Right.
For just continuing to be the same I'd always been. But again, at that time, and even now, for the most part, I'm not super into social politics. More and more now than ever, as the world gets a little crazier and crazier. But it's just funny that everybody turned on me, and I wasn't the one to make any changes whatsoever. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You were status quo. Heather, what are some? I mean, I'm sure you must have a lot of challenges that you've faced since you've started speaking out against this. What are some examples of the challenges that you've seen?
Yeah. I think for one, I've been really fortunate with my family and friends because they were just so happy that I'm no longer addicted to drugs or in and out of jail or prison, that they accepted me and my thoughts and beliefs. But also, most of my family and friends are normal people that have critical thinking skills. So that part was definitely easy for me. But I have had issues speaking out. So, like the E-Fry Society said I was transphobic. Definitely, I hate speaking bad about them because they were so good to me, and they're good to all the women who get out because they provide us like housing and supports and counseling and like all the services that we need to reintegrate into society and be like pro-social members of society. But I definitely felt like I was an outsider. They wanted me to take like training to learn about trans people. So like
Re-education camp.
re-education camp. Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And this
the
is
word
when
I'm
you
looking
leave
for.
prison, they make you do this, like when you go back into the world, so to speak.
So E-Fry wanted me to take the re-education training because
Sorry, Heather. What does E-Fry stand for?
Elizabeth Fry Society.
Okay.
And can you just take a bit of a step back and explain what that is for those of us who might not have heard of it?
Yeah, so they provide supports to criminalized women. So they'll have a halfway house, which is a residential community facility where you have to go if you are on provincial parole or federal parole. So it's somewhere that you have to sleep. There's rules. They help you find like employment and housing. They also offer tons of different programming. So they have like record suspension programs. They have programs for women that are in prostitution. They have tons and tons of programs for criminalized women. They're kind of like a John Howard Society, but for women. Like a lot of more people are familiar with John Howard Society.
Mm-hmm. So they wanted you to take this education course just solely on the fact that you were exhibiting to them transphobic behavior.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And because
Wow.
I went to the Megan Murphy event in Toronto and they weren't happy about it. So,
Wow.
yeah. And then also, I worked as a researcher at a hospital, and I worked on two different projects. They're about like criminalized people, drug use, mental health, that type of thing, where I do like qualitative interviews, data analysis, and make recommendations for future policy. And I worked for them for 2.5 years. And then one of the researchers found out who I was and that I was a founding member of caWsbar. And they ended up letting me go from that job.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was super unfortunate because it was right up my alley. And I also had a lot to offer since I am experienced in those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just like trying to find employment. Like, so currently I deactivated my Heather Mason Facebook account because I quit my one job and I was looking for another job and I just didn't want people looking me up online.
Right.
So it definitely impacts employment opportunities.
Yep. I'm going through the same thing right now myself.
Yes. Well, it's because it's wrong think, right? Like you're
Yep.
supposed to go with whatever they tell you is the way to think. That's the way you should think. And you should not be allowed to have your own thoughts, opinions, or anything. Like I'm a thought criminal.
Yep.
Yep.
We all are. Yep. No thinking aloud.
No. And then also definitely a lot of like threats from trans activists, like death threats, rape threats, all that type of stuff, right?
Oh, lovely.
Wow.
It's unbelievable.
But how loving and inclusive of them.
Yeah, it's so ironic because they're like the most non-inclusive group of people there are.
Yeah. They're always spewing some sort of hate, like, but we're the hateful ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question if you don't mind, just because we're on the topic of, trans people being, or at least trans activists being pretty aggressive or, doing things that you wouldn't think that community would do based on their image alone. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that they get their backs up so much, and why are we not allowed to think critically or think outside of their box or like some kind of normalcy? What happened in the last 15 years that changed all of that from your perspective?
They don't want you to be able to explain what's going on. It's like they pulled the wool over everyone's eyes, right? And if you're allowed to speak, then you make sense. And then you're able to make sense to other people. And then they can't keep up with the charade that they have going on. So they shut you down by calling you a bigot, a transphobe, by doxing you, by threatening to get you fired, by threatening to sue you so that you stop talking. So what's really interesting is like I told you guys about the Megan Murphy event, and like anytime she goes to speak, she has to have security, and like bomb threats get called in, or 700 trans activists show up and get violent where the cops have to like escort us out the back door through an alley and we have to run. And then when you have my events, like I've done over 20 protests across Canada to keep prison single sex, and no trans activists show up. And everyone asks me, well, why? And I think that it's because if trans activists show up, then the news shows up, and then other people pay attention, and then they're going to hear what's going on in the prisons. And they don't want you to know what's going on in the prisons. They don't want people to hear that 44% of men who identify as women in Correctional Service of Canada custody are sex offenders. They don't want you to know this information.
Wow.
So they don't show up. So that way the news doesn't report on it and the general public isn't aware of what's going on. And also, what argument could they possibly have that supports their position? Like, we're really going to let men in women's prisons who have sexually assaulted women or children who still who have not had surgery, what is their argument to women being sexually assaulted, sexually harassed, groomed, raped, being taken out for abortions? Like, you can't really have an argument to defend that position.
Well,
Is
yeah,
that really, that's actually happening?
Right? Like,
sorry.
Wow. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, me? I was just saying, if you do have an argument for that, you'd lose all credibility, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to control people or anything like that. You can't fight for that. I think in everyone's eyes, that's completely wrong.
Yeah. And the way it is now is people don't want to believe that the government has allowed this to happen. So therefore they think that it's not happening. And if the trans activist showed up to the protest and then said, well, you're just, whatever their argument, then people are going to realize, oh, it really is true. Like, I remember
Yeah.
when I was in prison and I would call my mom, I'd be like, oh, yeah, Mom, there's men in here. And she's like, what do you mean there's men in there? I'm like, yeah, they identify as women. And she's like, you're lying. And I'm like, Mom, I'm not lying. Like,
So-
it's happening.
What year? Because you said you were released in 2018. So what year did this whole thing start, where men identifying as women started ending up in women's prisons?
So, men who had had surgery and had been living as women, as a woman for years, majority of the time, they were already incarcerated with women going all the way back to the 80s.
Oh, wow.
But there were
Whoa.
very few and far in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, because that percentage was low to begin with.
Right. And
Yeah.
they would have had to have had surgery and done all of that stuff outside. So they would have already been living as a woman before they
Right.
got incarcerated.
Right.
Okay.
And then in 2012, Ontario put gender identity or expression into their provincial human rights code. And then provincial jails started allowing men who identified as women to be incarcerated on the women's side of the jails or in women's jails. Usually women get a little space tacked onto men's jails because there's just a million men's jails and there's not enough women to make individual women's jails. They started allowing them in 2015, but they kept them separated from us. So the first time I encountered it was in 2015, and it was a man named Christopher Webster, who's from London, Ontario, that has an extensive criminal history of sex crimes. And he was basically just hiding out because if you have skin beefs or you've harmed women and children, you don't fare well on the men's side. Like, you are in danger, and that's because of your crimes.
So I have a question. Do we think that maybe, because you said it was 44% of men that identify as women were sex offenders, do we think that this is maybe their sole reason for identifying as women, so that they don't end up in the men's prison and get killed on that side?
I think that's one of the reasons. I don't think it's the sole reason. I think another reason is so that they have access to their victim pool.
Mm-hmm. Well,
right?
yes, that as well.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. Because most men who commit sexual crimes are typically against females, right?
Yeah.
So now we're putting them in with women. And then in federal, we actually have the mother-child program where our children 4 years and under live with us full time. So not only do they have access to women, they have access to children, right?
Wow.
That's gross.
Yeah. So in 2017, gender identity or expression was added to the Canadian human rights. So then they started transferring men into women's prisons in 2017.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you don't need to have had surgery. You don't need to be on hormones. You don't need to be living as a woman. You could be. So what's interesting too is on the report that I'm going to say CSC. CSC is Correctional Service of Canada. So CSC released a report on their gender diverse prisoners, and 94% of these men who identified as women committed their crimes as their biological sex. So 94% of these men committed their crimes as men, and then when they went to jail, started identifying as women.
Come on.
Jesus.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Not surprising, the least.
Yeah, seems like a little bit of a pattern there, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
And another thing that I've noticed too is that a lot of these men who identify as women have indeterminate sentences or they're dangerous offenders. So indeterminate means that you don't know when you'll be released. It's up to the Parole Board of Canada to determine your eligibility for release. You could be in there for a very, very long time or never ever get out.
Oh, wow.
And same with the dangerous offender status. Most who have the dangerous offender status are indeterminate. They'll probably spend most of their life in prison, and they'll probably always remain on long-term supervision orders if in the community. So a lot of these men are identifying as women and requesting to transfer to women's prisons because they want an easier time. They want an easier ability to go for parole. And also, if they can't get out, then they want to be around women.
Right. So are you saying that, like, just even though they're on like the, dangerous list or whatever, all of a sudden, if they identify as women, they may actually be able to get out sooner just because they're a woman now?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And also, women's prisons and men's prisons are very, very different. Like women's prisons, you don't have a supermax because there are no women prisoners who you can't manage or you can't handle. Like we don't have weapons. We have 1 8-foot fence. We don't have guard towers and spotlights and like all these extra security measures that men's prisons have because women are easier to manage. So it's an easier time for them, right? And also there's less of us compared to men, so we're able to get through programming and get to before the parole board easier because there's not as many of us compared to the men.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. And then also, like I said, one of the main differences too is the mother-child program, right? So obviously women's prisons are very, very different than men's prisons if they're able to raise children in them.
I didn't know that actually.
Wow. So when I was a kid, this is something I don't necessarily mention often, but I did spend a few weeks of my childhood in a women's shelter with my mother. And I remember I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. And men were not allowed in the facility whatsoever. 99, if not 100% of the women that were there because of a man, right? So like even a delivery man was not allowed in the building. Like there was the main door and then the next door that was locked. And if the delivery man was coming and it was a man, you drop the box there. Like he wasn't allowed in. I cannot imagine that shelter today if men are in there.
Yeah, and men are in the women's shelters. Actually, you should pull this picture up so that the audience can see. But his name is Shane Green, and he was going into the women's shelters in Parry Sound, and he was making sexual comments to staff and sexually assaulted a woman there. He was arrested, put in jail, and I was actually attending his court by Zoom, and he told the judge that there's his picture. Now imagine sharing a room with this convicted sex offender who calls himself Stephanie.
Oh my God.
Scary, right?
That seems really scary.
Yeah.
I mean, even me, I'm not a big scary dude myself, but I wouldn't want to spend the night with that guy.
Yeah,
Wow.
I couldn't imagine for a woman, right? Like it'd be a whole lot scarier.
Yeah.
Yep. And
how can they be doing this to women who are, at their most vulnerable? The ones who have been abused and harmed by sex offenders and I don't understand how not everyone, I mean, obviously not everyone, but, the people who think that this is okay, how can they think that this is okay?
So what I've found is not a lot, but there are a few. Shelters don't want to abide by this policy, but they're unable to speak up or say anything for fear of losing their job. But
Really?
what I found is that if you are operating because you get grants from the government, then you need to abide by what the government wants you to do, or you're not getting funding. So
Oh my
if
God.
you don't get funding, you can't operate. Like, look at what they did to Vancouver Rape Relief, which is Canada's oldest women's rape shelter. And like, it opened in, I want to say, the 80s, maybe. They refused service to men who identified as women. So they couldn't be like a counselor to the women. They couldn't be in the shelter, but like they could take other programs or access other things. And they petitioned for them to lose funding from the city of Vancouver. So now they make up for it with donations from the community to
Wow.
fill that gap.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And they actually got taken to court too. But BC's unique because they have built into their human rights code something that allows for specific services and programs for females. So they're fortunate. The rest of the provinces don't have that built in. But that's the issue. So you lose your grants, you lose your funding, you get attacked and smeared by trans activists. And also, trans activists nail dead rats to their storefront door.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. You can find all this online, but yeah, Vancouver Rape Relief has gone through a lot to like stay with providing services for women only, like females. So it's quite crazy, but this is why they all go along with it, because they just don't have the courage to fight for what is right, and it's unfortunate. But back to this Shane Green guy. I was attending his Zoom hearings, and he told the judge that he really needed to be transferred to the women's jail because he identifies as a woman and he already tried to kill himself once because they weren't going to transfer him. So it's just like manipulation, right? Like, if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to kill myself. And it's like, honestly, I wouldn't be sad if you did.
Do you hear
Just
that being
saying.
the case? Oh,
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you hear that being the case for a lot of people? Like they'll use those manipulative tactics, or as we've called it before, weaponized compassion to get what they want.
You do see it because they use the same thing for transing our children, right? Would you rather, what did they say? Something about
Would you rather a dead son or an alive daughter, or the other way around?
yeah,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a common theme across the board, no matter what area we're talking about, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Heather, I actually wanted to backtrack quite a bit, but I just still can't get it out of my head. And I was kind of talking over Hayden at the time, but you mentioned that the prisons keep it on the down low, that some women in the prisons have to go for abortions.
Yeah.
Because of the trans men who are in the prisons.
Yeah. So
that is wild.
Oh my God.
I'm
so angry right now, by the way.
Yeah. So I know of an Indigenous woman at the Healing Lodge who was sexually assaulted and taken out for an abortion because Ariana, aka Byron Bushi, who he's in for murder. He killed someone with an axe at a pizza shop, and
oh, that's lovely.
The
Love
prairies.
that, yeah.
It was his baby.
Even better. Even better.
Yes. So yes, it is happening, and Byron has been in for a while. So here's what happens. Okay, so they'll send them to one women's prison, and once these men identify as women and transfer to a woman's prison, CSC can't involuntarily transfer them back to the men's prison. They can only involuntarily transfer them to another woman's prison. So with the case of Byron, he was at the Healing Lodge. He was sent to Edmonton, and then now he's been sent to Fraser Valley in BC. So he's been in 3 women's prisons that I know of, and he has sexually assaulted, sexually harassed, physically assaulted, groomed women at all 3 prisons.
That's enraging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing
least.
happened with Steve Mellenbacher, who goes by Samantha. He was like a 4th-time federal offender, did 20 years in the men's prison, was out on a stat release, got revoked, and got sent back and started identifying as a woman. He was at Fraser Valley, Edmonton, and then Grand Valley in Ontario. And there's a wake of victims, like a trail of victims at all 3 prisons as well with him, because they just transfer them to another woman's prison when they can no longer manage them at that prison. And he actually was charged with sexual assault and criminal harassment. And he took a plea deal and pled guilty to criminal harassment, and they dropped the sexual assault charge.
Wow.
This is horrible. I don't understand how this is happening.
Yeah. Like this country is such a fucking mess.
So at this point, it's obviously an agenda from higher up. Like the stats you've mentioned and the stories you've also mentioned, anybody in a position to do something about it has all the evidence they need and aren't doing about it. And like you say, certain institutions will lose government funding and whatnot. So does the chat or the discussion ever get to the part where this is a coordinated effort or agenda where I guess, I don't know, probably could lead to population control by confusing gender and whatnot?
Yeah. So it's the whole gender identity industry, and it is an industry, is a moneymaker. Like transing children and making them become pharmaceutical patients for the rest of their lives and being on all of these drugs and having all of these health problems makes pharmaceutical companies and doctors and everybody else billions and billions of dollars. And the only way to be able to push all of this is to ignore all the harms that it causes, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, when we're looking at it from the prison aspect, you're naive to believe that a criminal isn't manipulating the situation to benefit themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what we do. So I think they probably didn't really think about it, like the big picture, and that this is just one of the consequences of them pushing to be able to make all of this money.
Right, like a byproduct that they're just deciding to stomach because the bigger picture is that money that they prefer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I'm not
It
punching
definitely
things
is.
right now. I'm just saying.
It is
Well-
really frustrating that, you know, I've been advocating about this for like 5 years now, and that I feel like in like regards to like policy and the government and CSC, I'm no farther ahead. But I do believe that a lot of gains have been made with educating the public. And I also believe that with the whole COVID lockdown, that with everybody being off work and online, that it has helped be able to educate the public, because I found a lot of people from like the whole freedom convoy and all of that stuff, they were all willing to listen.
Right.
For sure.
What do you have up there, Dave?
Just some points on kind of what Heather answered to my question as far as an article here of just, what is this, 2022 or 2021, researchers promoted the medical transition of children through biased research after receiving funding from pharmaceutical companies that produce hormone therapy medications. So it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's exactly what we talked about. They're in bed with each other. They're creating the studies that say that their approach to what's going on is the right thing to do. Meanwhile, the money's just flowing in a circle back in their pocket. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And like you were saying, like a lot of people, like they're afraid to say no, like these shelters and stuff, they're afraid to say no to letting men in and stuff like that, because they're going to lose funding or whatever. And it kind of goes into what we were even talking about with David Icke last week about, peaceful mass non-compliance, right? If we could convince enough of these shelters, for example, to say, no, fuck you, right? Then that's when people have to listen. The higher up needs to listen and be like, oh shit, well now they're all like shutting their doors to like now it's a widespread problem where they're not letting them in. The media is going to get involved now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe we need to actually change policy. But the problem is that too many won't do it because everything is driven by fear.
Yeah.
And they're dependent on handouts from the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just going to say that too, and this is what we've seen with COVID too. The same reason why doctors wouldn't speak out, and why so many employees just went ahead and got the jabs or what have you, is because they didn't want to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And so we have this real problem where the people at the top who are making all the decisions, they don't care about, the people down below them who need that money to make a living. And these places that are there for women, vulnerable women, they don't want to lose out on the funding because then they can't help the women in need. And so we're stuck in this really difficult spot where so many people probably aren't okay with what's happening, but they don't want to lose their livelihoods, or they don't want to lose the funding for the people who need it the most.
Yeah, exactly.
And another example of centralization of power just being a horrible thing.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
There's a lot of overlap with the whole COVID situation and this gender identity situation. Like it's basically, they're both like the same thing, but different.
Yeah. So Heather, question, how can we help with is it caWsbar, right?
Yes.
How can we help with your movement specifically? What are some things we can do?
So if women actually want to join caWsbar, you can send us an email, become an associate of caWsbar. You'll meet women that are like-minded, but also women that are in your area. We do a lot of meetups, like we'll go for lunch together and go sticker, or we do letter writing together. And it's good to be able to find people that live near you who think like you. So
I'm signing up.
Yes.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
So sign up for caWsbar, send us an email, but also share our posts, share our flyers, our postcards, our videos. And also you can support me by going to my protests. And I have a protest coming up in Toronto on Saturday, September 21st.
I'm there.
Yes.
I am
And
the closest to Toronto. Well, Dave, you can join me.
Let's go.
yeah, so it'll be between 2 and 4 p.m. and we'll be downtown by College Park subway station. You can DM me. I'll give you the exact address. But I'll be bringing all the signs. We'll have flyers, postcards, stuff to hand out to the people that are walking by. And then normally all of us just go and grab dinner after and chat and get to know each other, because a lot of people that I don't know who just follow me on Twitter or something, they end up showing up, which is really cool to finally
awesome.
Meet people that you talk to on Twitter, but you've never met in real life. But yeah, so that is Saturday, September 21st. I will be in Toronto.
Awesome.
Darn it.
Well,
I'm
You will be
traveling,
meeting.
but
Yeah, sorry, Ash.
I
Heather,
would be
you'll be
there if I
meeting me.
could.
You will meet me on September 21st.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a good time, and like downtown Toronto, there's a lot of people that are out walking and stuff. So like you can stop them and hand them flyers and talk to them, because really that's what we need to do. We need to make the public aware of what is going on. Like if they don't know, then they won't do anything. And what I found is that like when I was reaching out to MPs, they were all like, well, you aren't in my riding, so I don't have to meet with you.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need to do is get the people that are in those ridings angry so that they contact their MP. And if the MPs get enough pressure, then because all they care about are votes, right? So
Yeah.
if they realize that the people in their ridings are upset with them, then they'll start doing something because they'll be afraid of losing their seat.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
We've sent some correspondence back and forth with our MPs, and this guy wants nothing to do with it. It's really disappointing. It's gotten to the point now where he won't even respond to us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a really hard time when I was living in Toronto because I was a Davenport riding, and it was Julie. I can't think of her last name now, but she was Liberal, and
Of course.
yeah, she
In
really did.
Toronto? What? No.
Right. I know. I moved back home to my hometown Sarnia like 2 years ago, and we're very conservative here because it's like Chemical Valley and it's all like trades guys and stuff. So
Thank
it's
God.
been so refreshing to be back in a sane city.
It's always nice, yeah.
Yeah. But Julie wouldn't meet with me, and like it was just like she just didn't care. She wasn't going to do anything. And it was really frustrating. The only reason she even got in contact with me was because other people that held power that were in her riding called her out for it. So then she was like, oh, I didn't know Heather was trying to get a hold of me. And then
yeah,
she contacted me, but then she ghosts me after.
Shocking.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you would have told me 20 years ago that I'd be having a talk with someone that is bringing attention to women being unsafe in certain spaces, and then would like to also bring further attention to that to the public, and then go out and have dinner and then gets called the radical one, I would have never believed you.
Right? If you had told me 20 years ago that today people would be identifying as a fucking potato, I wouldn't have believed you either. But like, here we are.
Yeah. It really is hard to believe, but yeah,
It
here we are.
baffles my mind every day. Every day.
Yeah.
So I keep thinking, like, I keep pinching myself. Like, is this for real? Is this really happening? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's happening. Yeah, okay. Carry on.
Yeah, it seems like everything's gotten so out of control that, I mean, there has to be some sort of swing back to some form of reasonableness and more critical thinking, because I think that is one of the good things that's happening. Like even having you on today, Heather, and hearing your story, and like I hear things about this type of these things taking place in women's prisons, but actually talking to you, and you've experienced it, or maybe not firsthand, but people who have, because you've been in that system. It really drives it home that this is happening and it needs to get fixed. And so I think the more that people like you can talk about these things and bring awareness to this, it's so important, because people won't stand for it if they actually understand how crazy it's gotten.
Yeah. And like I said, for a lot of people, it's just hard to believe that the government is allowing this to happen. Like they want to believe that the government is going to keep them safe and do the right thing, right? And that's just not the case.
Yep. Government doesn't care about anybody.
Nope.
Except for the protected classes.
Well, yes.
Until it's their day to, get thrown under the bus for another
Exactly.
protected class.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
does anyone else have any questions for Heather?
No, but
I do.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the more you talk about like, the trans women in federal prisons, it reminds me, and I just want to get your opinion on, I think I know what your opinion on it would be, but do you know the Riley Gaines situation with Leah Thompson, the swimmer?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah,
What
Leah
is your
Thomas.
opinion on the trans women in men or in women's sports, and why are they doing that?
So they're mediocre men who get nowhere in the men's division, and now they're getting all the awards, cash prizes, podium spots in the women's. So why wouldn't they?
yeah, and I think they're
Yeah.
not when people like us like shed light on it, they're allowing it to continue again because the gender, what did you call it? The gender identity industry benefits largely from that, right? So they can't shut that down.
Okay.
They got to keep it going.
Right. If you
So
make,
it can
sorry.
continue making everybody money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to Coach Blade yet? Have you had her on your show?
No.
But we will. Can you connect us with her?
Yeah, I can. Linda is amazing, and she is an advocate for women's single sex sports.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
yeah, she's brilliant. I love her.
Is she based in Canada?
Yeah, she is in Alberta.
Oh,
Nice.
awesome.
No way.
Yeah, close to Edmonton. I can't remember exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to talk to her.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll reach out to her and see.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's always been a big interest of mine since that blew up, specifically because it just is one of those things where I look at it and I can see how clearly unfair it is. And that's not any slight on women and women's sports. It's just you look at it and you just know it's unfair, right? So thank you for answering that.
Yeah, unfair, but also dangerous. Like
Oh yeah,
extremely dangerous. Like women are
especially in
going
the
to
fighting
get
sports.
yeah. Like
Oh boy.
they're even that the girl who was, I think it's college volleyball maybe, and she was playing against a man who identified as a woman, and he spiked her, and she like can't even play sports anymore and has medical issues and
Oh my
stuff from
God.
it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is.
That's crazy.
And you'd think when things like that happen, they would turn around and go, well, maybe this isn't a good idea.
Well,
no.
even there's a rugby player out in kind of near Kitchener Waterloo, a trans person by the name of Ash, doesn't even, let's say it doesn't even make any effort to look like a woman whatsoever. Just a big dumpy man. And Ash got the award for being something like the hardest hitter or something. It's like, oh yeah, you think so?
No shit.
Here's
Dave,
a
what
13
do you got
second
up there?
clip of the spike that that we were talking about, that Heather was talking about.
Oh God.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Oh my God.
Right.
Come on.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
Oh my
dangerous.
goodness.
There's a reason why males and females do not compete against each other. And it's because we are different. We're biologically different.
Yeah.
Like Sue said, there would be a trickle effect of right there on the, let's say something like that. You finally put your foot down and you were saying no more to athletes like that. It would trickle down into what Heather is fighting for, and quite possibly could be used as a precedent of like, okay, if we've admitted over here that certain people born a certain way are stronger, faster, and more physically dominant naturally, then it would apply to Heather's situation, right? So they can't give into that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for sure.
It would cross over for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And then they'd have to admit that there are biological differences and that you are either male or female.
right? Which just destroys the whole thing for them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I have to say, like, you know, growing up as a girl and looking back and kind of noticing the messaging that was, you know, passed on to me from the different institutions, and, you know, like, girls and boys they're the same, and girls can do anything, and it starts as one of those great messages, like, you know, just be confident and you can do anything a guy can, and it starts from, like, you know, the seeds of something good, but then they end up inverting it and turning it on the women to the point where now we're not allowed to say that we're biologically different. And then we have our rights taken away from us, where it started as something that was supposed to, you know, give us some whatever opportunities, you know, the same opportunities as men or what have you. And now it's like, oh, now you get none of those.
Yeah.
Exactly. Where are the feminists now, for fuck's sake?
Yeah.
I never really thought of it that way, where it's like seeded, because like I remember growing up, you know, when I was a kid, like maybe 2004, 2005, like going to first grade, second grade, all that. And those are things you'd see in like ads or on TV, or they talk about in a classroom. And then you just have that idea growing up. And I didn't realize that, you're right, it kind of develops into this, you know, this grander idea that we have now that's actually harmful versus a positive message that it started with.
And my thing is that don't think that they won't do that to trans people. At some point, they're going to go and invert it as well, turn it on its head, and then use them for whatever purposes they want to down the road.
Oh,
And
100%.
so, you know, they'll get thrown under the bus at some point, and some new class will come in that will take their place.
And I will be right there to say, I fucking told you so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Well, this has been a fantastic yet infuriating conversation. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It is. It's very infuriating. Because I feel like my hands are tied. Like, what I think is common sense apparently isn't like so common for, you know, like CSC and the government. It's like, don't put men in women's prisons, especially don't put men who have penises in women's prisons, and really don't put sex offender males in women's prison. Like,
yeah.
It seems pretty simple.
I follow this very based gay guy. He works with Gays Against Groomers over on Instagram, and he has this slogan: "Make sense common again."
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm like, yes.
I
Can we
like that.
can we do that, please?
Please, let's get there.
Do you think from your perspective and with caWsbar, do you see like your movement growing more? Like when you do host these protests, do you see that you are kind of, whether it be you or by word of mouth, that people are waking up to this and kind of going like, hey, like this just doesn't make any sense. Why are we still participating in this?
yeah, I've definitely seen more and more people wake up to this. Like, our membership has grown substantially at caWsbar. And also there are other little organizations that keep popping up, like grassroots movements as well. Like, I remember when we first formed caWsbar, like there wasn't really any other organization in Canada that focused on like repealing Bill C-16 and fighting for women's sex-based rights and protections. And now there are so many little groups. And then also there are like LGB groups as well that are fighting because they don't want to be grouped with the TQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
I've seen that like clips online of them disagreeing and saying, no, like we're not a part of this whole alphabet group. We're just, you know, we're just gay, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The OG
Actually,
gays.
there's a slogan by like some lesbian group, and it's "Get the L out," and it's the letter L, and it's like leaving the LGBTQ alphabet.
Oh, that's neat.
I'm like, that's pretty clever.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've noticed that there's like been a lot of books that have been released, and there's like a lot of events that have been happening in Canada lately too. So I feel like a lot more people have gained the courage to be able to speak out and to do things. So
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's nice to
Yeah.
know there's more like-minded people out there. I mean, up until a couple of years ago, I was, speaking a completely different language, but here I am talking to all of you. So,
Yeah.
like, I'd like to
Same
think
here.
that's happening on a bigger scale. Yeah, Ash and I are
Yeah.
quite alike in that regard.
We're recovering liberals.
Yes, we
So
are.
the
We'll
the
make it.
movement is growing. Yeah.
We'll make it.
Yeah.
We're almost there.
Yeah. Well, Heather, before we close up, is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about yet?
nothing at the top of my mind. We covered quite a bit.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's probably a pretty good place to end it. So I just wanted to thank you so much again for joining us today. Can you please let everyone know where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on X, at Heather Mason or Mason1342111F. Also on the poster that they posted, my email address is there too, so you can reach out to me by email. I do have a Heather Mason Facebook account, but like I said, I've deactivated at the time being, so your best bet is to just reach me by email or by X.
Awesome.
Right.
And now I absolutely love your ex name. That is fantastic. I thought it was
Yeah,
just
that is
like
really
what
neat.
they gave you, through X, not what they gave you through the prison system.
Yeah.
Well, it was such a pleasure speaking to you, and I just want to thank you so much for your courage and fortitude in facing the challenges that you have in order to do the incredible work that you are today. Suze, do you have anything you want to close out with?
I'm angry as fuck, but super thrilled to have met you virtually, Heather. And I will see you on September 21st. We're going to protest the shit out of it. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I hope to stand alongside and help you down that path. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Dave, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it was nice meeting you, Heather. Again, what you're doing 20 years ago, I didn't think someone would be needed for this, but obviously it's there, and it's a good thing you're doing it because I don't know, we've talked a lot about trickle here, trickle there today, and what you're doing and your success will also trickle down to like what kids are learning about and what they are seeing as okay and not okay. So just keep doing what you're doing, and I appreciate what you are doing.
Yeah, and Hayden, it was really nice to have you on. Not so behind the scenes tonight. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, no, this is definitely different for me, but I like, you guys know me. I like to talk. And Heather, thank you for answering all my questions and, opening my eyes a little bit more to where this problem is kind of in all aspects, not just like, because for me, primarily, I would see it in sports and I'd just be like, oh my God, what's going on? But to see it more across the board and have a better understanding, I really appreciate that. I think your movement, at least from what I've heard from you and what I can see on your X page, is fantastic. And I hope it continues to grow and you continue to drive awareness of this. And I hope more people wake up to this. I think it's, you know what, like when you see how completely unfair it is, or when you see you're putting people in these situations, especially vulnerable women, it's just disgusting to me. I think that's absolute, like, and all for funding or for money. Like, it's just, money is evil, right? And I just think it's disgusting. And I'm probably maybe not just as angry as Sue's, but I'm getting close.
Yeah.
Fucking
And I just
angry.
I can't thank you enough. I can't express enough how wonderful this conversation's been. And thank you for having me on as a co-host. I always like talking to you guys, so this was great.
Aw, Hayden.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Heather. Like I said, it's just been awesome talking to you. And it was Megan Murphy that she's the first one that I saw talking about you. And then I started listening to some of the podcasts that had you on. And then I poked around your X page. And so I'm so happy after kind of getting to know you without talking to you to be able to have this conversation. And I was so happy when you said yes that you'd want to come on. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. And Suze,
Yes.
you are hosting next week. What are we up to?
Oh, that's right. I am hosting next week. Well, we are going to have our good Twitter ex-friend, Miss Natasha Montreal, join us.
Awesome.
Her and I have gotten some slack recently online from conservatives, mind you, about the fact that we openly red pill our kids. And people think that we shouldn't do that because, we're not allowing them to be kids. But we red pill them in an age appropriate way. So we figured we'll probably have a big chat in regards to how critical it is to red pill our kids, to make sure that they know what lies beneath the shadows and what they're coming in contact with and what challenges they're going to face. So we'll probably have a big talk about that, and we'll probably freestyle a little bit because I love freestyling.
Awesome. I love Natasha, so that'll be a great chat, I'm sure. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. If you like this conversation, please go back and listen to some of our other episodes. We did have an awesome episode last week with the legendary David Icke. So go back and check them out. Please be sure to like and subscribe and share this with other people if you like what you're hearing. Well, thanks everyone and have a good day. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.